With the price of fuel hitting $1.50 a litre, there's a growing push to develop renewable alternatives. Scientists in Australia are part of the global race to develop new biofuels. In fact, researchers here claim to be leading the world with a project turning waste into oil. But investment in such technologies is slow, while industries wait for further detail on the proposed carbon tax. Rebecca Baillie reports.
It looks unassuming, but inside this tin shed on the New South Wales Central Coast, they're turning waste into liquid gold.
You will see the liquid bio-oil coming out, just like beer out of a tap at the Oktoberfest.
Using hot water, high pressure and extreme temperatures, Sydney University scientists and engineers at Ignite Energy are converting a worthless forestry byproduct into oil.
We can have fuels which are stable. They are liquid, they are storable, they are transportable and they are blendable. And that's a revolutionary breakthrough, and that is what no one else in the world can do. We cover a very broad range of biomass materials.
Professor Thomas Maschmeyer says the process could work with any biomass, from bamboo to algae. What's more, the liquid biocrude can be processed into drop-in transport fuels at conventional refineries. So this beaker here, the end of the process, that can be pumped straight into a car?
Absolutely, into a car, into an aeroplane or into a large diesel engine.
Using biofuels to propel vehicles is nothing new. The original Model T Ford ran on ethanol. And most modern cars are geared to run on ethanol-blended fuels. Currently, Australian ethanol is made from waste wheat or sugarcane. But Thomas Maschmeyer argues, unlike his next-generation biofuel, which is made from non-edible sources, increasing demand for ethanol will see the need to eat into the food crop.
In terms of the food versus fuel debate, we clearly win on all fronts.
Australia's thirst for transport fuels saw 772,000 barrels of fossil fuel oil consumed every day last year, contributing about 14% of the nation's greenhouse gas emissions. Refineries here have been operating at full capacity for the past 8 years, and the country must import 30% of its petrol, diesel and jet fuel.
We're basically dependent on fuel supplies from a few countries, mainly in the Middle East, and we've seen recent political volatility which has caused quite a spike in the oil price and reflected at the Bowser. How many $1 million was this?
In total it took us about 1.5 and some.
Dr Stephen Shook says securing Australia's fuel supply and reducing its greenhouse gas emissions rely on projects like this biomass to biofuel venture, which has received a federal government research grant.
These advanced biofuels can reduce the greenhouse gas emissions by about 90% compared to, let's say, conventional petroleum or diesel.
The availability of affordable, clean energy is going to be the defining factor, not just for the US, but for the world.
Dale Gardner from the United States government's National Renewable Energy Laboratory says the US is investing an enormous amount in developing homegrown green transport fuels. That's because America uses about 1 trillion litres of fossil fuel gasoline, diesel and jet fuel every year and imports 65% of that, mostly from politically unstable countries in the Middle East and North Africa.
In Washington, they're talking about whether we need to tap into our strategic petroleum reserve in order to make up for those few percent, of barrels that aren't going to be coming from that area.
Good news, the green FA-18 Hornet.
The Pentagon isn't seeking these alternative fuels just to protect our environment. They're pursuing these homegrown energy sources to protect our national security.
The United States Department of Defence is testing biofuels in its air, ground and naval fleets, aiming to halve its Navy petroleum use by 2020. While ethanol's market share has grown in Australia's eastern states, compulsory mandates for ethanol blends in both Queensland and New South Wales have been stalled due to lack of supply.
Australia seems to be lagging the rest of the world when it comes to both the production of the fuel and the uptake at the consumer end.
CEO of the Biofuels Association, Heather Brodie, represents Australia's ethanol and biodiesel producers, including this biodiesel operator in the Hunter Valley. The industry warns it'll go out of business if draft legislation is passed by federal parliament to apply higher excise on local alternative fuels, bringing them in line with imports.
If the imported product is entering the country at, say, 50 or 60% less than the Australian producers can even get their feedstocks, they can't compete.
Consultant Michael Cochrane publishes an annual report into the Australian biofuels industry. He says industry is reluctant to invest in Australian alternative fuels due to confusion over both the proposed alternative fuels legislation and the price on carbon.
The industry is really looking for clarity and detail on how the carbon tax will be implemented so that they can invest and that investments are not, frustrated by change of policy further down the track.
It would have been very helpful if we had had a clear resolution of this issue a year and a half ago.
It's very difficult for me to see how the future generations of biofuels in Australia can possibly be successful if the current generations can't be successful.
What everyone agrees on, though, the future of transportation relies on sustainable, renewable replacements for fossil fuels.
There's no silver bullet. The days of cheap oil when I basically could drill a hole in the ground and it would come up for free, they are very close to be over now.
Rebecca Baillie reporting there. This weekend,